What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, and welcome to week 3 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2024 CFL season. And ladies and gentlemen, it is a wonderful day. It's warming up outside. We are massaged. We are caffeinated. There's McDonald's in my belly. What's a guy have to complain about? I suppose I could sit here and complain that I was 5-7 for the second straight week coming out of week 2, but with the way the first 2 weeks have gone, I'm not too concerned about that. If you'll remember, we go back to last year, I started really deadly slowly in the first 3-4 weeks of the season. 5-7, I ain't concerned about that at all. Did go 3-1 straight up, so that's good news. That evened my record for the season at 4-4. Unfortunately, 1-3 on both of the betting picks against the spread and over under. So yeah, 5-7 for a second straight week. Now 10-14 to start the season. It's slow. We'd have to call ourselves 0-2 if we were, an actual football team, but I'm not too concerned about it at this point. Our slow start over 2 weeks was unfortunately mirrored in week 2 in CFL Fantasy, where I only brought in 76.4 points with my roster last week. That has me sitting, actually, it was only about just outside the top 3,500 across the whole fantasy game in week 2, and outside of the top 400 in Derek Taylor's league. For the season, I'm at 173.3, just inside the top 3,000 overall, and just inside the top 400. So, kind of not as good a performance in week 2, certainly, as I would have wanted to see. My most outstanding player in week 2 is Winnipeg Blue Bombers running back Johnny Augustine. Now, I did have Zach Collaros, and he did technically have more points, but he also had the 2 times captain multiplier on him. So I'm going to give this to Johnny Augustine. He put up 13.8 points, found the end zone for the second straight week. Johnny Augustine was my MOP. Our week 3 slate of games looks like this. We've got the Ottawa REDBLACKS in Montreal taking on the Alouettes. The BC Lions are traveling to Winnipeg to take on the suddenly 0-2 Blue Bombers. The Edmonton Elks go to Toronto to play an Argos team that's coming in off of their bye week. And Hamilton and Saskatchewan renew hostilities in a rematch from last week, this time in Saskatchewan. So we'll start at the top there with that Ottawa-Montreal game, and what a statement for the REDBLACKS in their season and home opener. Drew Brown completing 61% of his passes, 238 yards, and a touchdown, upsetting his former team with, of course, a major hat tip to the defense on that one, only allowing 327 total yards to the Bombers, generating 3 turnovers, and defensively, they were 66.7% on second down. Winnipeg only translating, I believe, 6 of their 18 second down opportunities into first downs. And the REDBLACKS truly dominated in the run game in that one. They had possessed the ball for 35 minutes. And I know maybe I harp on a little too much about time of possession, but when you possess the ball for 35 minutes, you control the flow of the game. They put up 129 yards offensively rushing. That was 6.1 yards per carry for the REDBLACKS, and only allowed a measly 42 yards rushing on just 3 yards per carry. Obviously would be remiss if I didn't point out Raquel Armstead for the Ottawa REDBLACKS, 16 carries for 95 yards. On Montreal's side, the Alouettes rediscover their run game, running for 116 yards and a touchdown on 19 carries, and continue to absolutely feast on big defensive splash plays. They generated 3 sacks and had 3 turnovers last week. That helped them overcome a relatively undisciplined performance, 9 penalties for 75 yards. Alouettes moved to 2-0. And quite frankly, on most nights, this is the Cody Fajardo that the Alouettes need to win. Complete 20 or more passes, 250 yards or more, multiple touchdowns. It's not a game-breaking performance, but it's clean. And that's what Fajardo has been all season, this very young season, but he's been clean for both of these games. Only 1 turnover in the past 2 games this season as a team for the Alouettes. They're playing clean football. Fajardo doesn't have to be a game breaker for Montreal to find a lot of success. They've shown that through the first 2 weeks. So the Alouettes are obviously the proven commodity here as they've played 2 games. Ottawa has only played the 1. They've got the number 1 most efficient defense in the CFL so far this season, and they're top 3 in offensive efficiency as well. So whether they've got the ball or they don't, Montreal is playing some excellent football. I'm interested to see what Drew Brown's encore performance is going to look like this week against, again, an incredible defense. I've got to lean the Alouettes' way because, as I said, they are the proven commodity in this matchup. Let's take Montreal to beat Ottawa. On the line here, the Alouettes are laying -7 points here as a very heavy home favorite. And I understand that they beat Winnipeg by 2 scores. So on that level, I get it. But, I mean, they kind of squeaked past Edmonton last week. I mean, they only beat Edmonton by 3. So for Montreal to lay a full 7 point, and I realize that was like back-to-back road games. I realize what goes into that. But 7 points to me, it just strikes me as too much for an Ottawa team that is second only to Montreal so far in defensive efficiency this season. Granted, Ottawa's only played the 1 game. 7 points to me is too many. I'm actually going to hedge my bets here, and I'm going to take the +7 on the Ottawa REDBLACKS. I do feel like the upset is potentially live if Ottawa has a repeat performance like they showed in their first game against Winnipeg. So let's take the +7 here on the REDBLACKS on the road. Total in the game set at 47.5 points. This is another reason why I like the +7. I really like this number to stay under. Montreal has been under this number specifically in both weeks so far this season. So let's stay under the 47.5 point total. We're going to go maybe 24-19 in favor of the Alouettes. The Owls still win, but the REDBLACKS keep it close enough that they cover the +7 and give me the under on the points. Let's go to Winnipeg now. Bombers playing host to the Lions. Nobody gripping their sticks in the early part of this CFL season harder than the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but I'd like to start with BC. The Lions outlast Calgary last week in a game where the quarterbacks were the show. Vernon Adams completing just under 60% of his passes, 277 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, added a rushing touchdown and 16 yards on 4 carries. The Lions go on a 9-0 run in the 4th quarter, aided by a pair of critical sacks, part of 4 on the game. And let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, the defense is eaten for free after that one. The defense was the primary reason that the Lions wound up winning that football game. Once again, like I said, 4 sacks. They generated 3 turnovers. They had 5 total tackles for loss in that game. They were in the backfield all day. They held Dedrick Mills to just 46 yards on 11 carries rushing, and no Calgary receiver had 60 or more receiving yards. So that was a really big performance for the BC Lions. I should point out, Dedrick Mills did have 99 yards on 6 catches. So I don't count him obviously as a receiver. When I say receiver, I meant wide receiver. Dedrick Mills did have himself a good game, but no other receiver, no actual receiver for the Stamps had 60 yards receiving. That was a good performance for a Lions defense that needed a bounce back after week 1. Speaking of needing a bounce back in the worst way, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers trailed last week's game 13-0 in the middle of the 2nd quarter. This is uncharted territory for this Bombers dynasty. This is not typical. This is not normal. Stuff is going wrong here. Stuff is happening. And they still, despite the fact that they were trailing 13-0, they had a lead. They managed to have a lead through the 3rd quarter. But at the end, it was the little things. A sack on 2nd down, a sack on 3rd down, generating a turnover on downs, and under 50% passing and 2 interceptions from Zach Collaros sunk the Bombers to 0-2. Bombers also showing an uncharacteristically porous run defense, allowing 129 yards and a rush touchdown on 21 carries to the REDBLACKS last week, and it led to a wide chasm in time of possession. Like we mentioned, Winnipeg only possessed the ball for 25 minutes of that game. Usually they're doing that to other teams. Didn't happen this time without Brady Oliveira. Johnny Augustine wasn't bad. He He only touched the ball 9 times. He turned those 9 touches into 58 all-purpose yards and had a touchdown. So I feel like maybe he should have touched the football maybe a little bit more. A league low offensive efficiency for Winnipeg. And once again, completely uncharted territory. But right now, through 2 weeks, it is costing the Winnipeg Blue Bombers 20.3 yards to score a point. 20.3 yards. 2 full first downs to score a point. As a matter of perspective, the number 1 team, which is Toronto, and granted they've only played 1 game, the number 1 team, it's only costing them 10.7. It's almost half. So that is the worst mark so far in this young CFL season in terms of offensive efficiency, and it belongs to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers of all teams. But you also can't marry that to a lack of possession. And again, 25 minutes, not going to get it done. The Lions were able to right the ship, especially on the defensive side, at least for now. But to be perfectly honest, neither one of these teams, the way they've played through the first 2 weeks, inspire a ton of confidence. On Winnipeg's side, you might be without Brady Oliveira once again. You might be without Dalton Schoen. Neither one of those players are practicing. You're already without Kenny Lawler for the long term. Things could get real bad, but this is also a team that has to be acting now with a little bit of desperation. Based strictly on performance on the field so far in this CFL season, you have to rank the Winnipeg Blue Bombers number 9 in the league. There's objectively, they're the least efficient offense. They're the second least efficient defense. So to say it's been a slow start is a wild overstatement. In saying that, once again, this has to be a team that's acting with desperation. Last week I said they were going to be coming into that game pissed off. This week they're coming into the game desperate. They have to find a way. They have to find a way to win this game. I'm going to lean on desperation, and I'm going to take the Bombers at home. This is as close to a must-win game as you could possibly have 3 weeks into a season. It's crazy. But they have to find a way to win this game. So I'm going to lean on desperation. Let's take the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. We're also getting an incredible price on the Bombers as they are only laying -2. Winnipeg -2 in Winnipeg. You may never see that price again during this dynasty. For however long this dynasty continues, you may never see that price ever again. So let's take the -2 on Winnipeg. I like them to win. It's a relatively small price to pay. Total in the game set at 51, and it is the highest total of the week. I'm actually going to stay under on it. Once again, 2 offenses that aren't exactly, lighting the world on fire. BC's getting more yardage, but they're not in the top 3 in terms of efficiency. Defensively, neither one of these teams have been super, super, super special so far, but such a big number. I just kind of feel my gut tells me an under in this. I'm going to go 27-21 in favor of the Bombers. So Winnipeg wins. Winnipeg covers the -2 and give me a marginal under on that 51. All right, Edmonton in Toronto is next up, and the Elks continue to look relatively impressive in losing efforts. Now, again, this is relatively impressive related to them. You know what I mean? The expectations for this team are fairly low. But through the first 2 weeks, this is a team that is kind of doing things right, but at the same time, the same problems that plagued them in week 1 persisted into week 2, which is the fact that through 2 weeks, they have asked McLeod Bethel-Thompson to attempt 84 passes. 42 and 42. 84 pass attempts versus just 18 carries total for Kevin Brown. That's not a formula to compete in football games. It's just not. Kevin Brown is the guy that made you feel comfortable trading away Walter Fletcher. He's the guy that made it sting a little less that you lost a guy like James Wilder. He's supposed to be the guy. He's got to touch the ball. At the very least, this past game for the Elks is what I would call a well-balanced breakfast. All right? There's 5 receivers on the Elks who have at least 8 catches so far this season. I believe there are 3 who are in double digits. So MBT's attempting a lot of passes, but it's kind of an air raid offense. He's definitely spreading the ball around. With those 5 guys, it's between like 8 and 16 catches. So he's definitely spreading the ball around, and they're firmly in the doing good things, but not getting rewarded for them yet territory. That's where this Elks team is, and it's uncomfortable, but they have to commit to continue doing the good things. This is a team that so far this season is better than 50% on second down. Last year, they would have killed for that. I think they're better than 55% actually on second down so far this season. The pass rush has been really solid. I can't remember the team that's in the lead so far through 2 weeks. But one team is in the lead in the CFL in sacks and have 6. Edmonton has 5. They're generating pass rush. They're getting pressure. They're doing good things. Now it's a matter of cleaning up the mental mistakes and cleaning up the big splash plays, which have been killing them so far this year. For the Argos, they are off of their bye after a season-opening win against BC back in week 1 in a game Cameron Dukes was on fire. 78% on his passes, 254 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, added a touchdown and 37 yards on 5 carries. He was do it all, and he was spreading the ball around. Touchdowns to 3 different receivers, and had not 1, not 2, not 3, 7 receivers who caught multiple passes. 7 guys who caught at least 2. Obviously, you can't expect that every single week out of Dukes, but what you can expect, what is very replicable for this Argos team, the dominant pass rush. 6 quarterback sacks for the Argos in that game against BC, and a ball-hawking defense. They generated 5 turnovers. Those things are very replicable because we've seen Toronto do that over the last couple of seasons. This is a very good ball-hawking defense. They can definitely replicate results like that. And again, even if Dukes doesn't quite have that kind of game in him every week, the defense can. You know, I do certainly have to ask how much, if any, that the bye week hurt the Argos' momentum. Because again, after a game like they had in week 1, I wouldn't have wanted to go on a bye immediately after that. So I think it's a fair, valid question. Did the bye week actually wind up hurting them from a momentum perspective? It's very tough for me to find the upset here. I was kind of looking for it to see if, like, okay, if I want it, can I find it? And I just don't think I can yet. Again, Edmonton is on the come up. It's kind of slow. I just don't think I can find the upset here, especially if there's no run game on the Elks' part. So we're definitely on the Toronto Argos here to extend their record to 2-0 coming off the bye. Let's take the Argos at home to beat the Elks. On the line, the Argos are laying -6 here, and I think if we had seen some better results from the Elks defensively so far this season, just from like an efficiency perspective, like right now they're 7th out of 9 teams in the CFL in terms of defensive efficiency. If that number was looking a little bit better, if they were, say, top half of the league, like if they were sitting here with the defensive efficiency of, well, the Argos, or even like Saskatchewan, I might be like, you know what? I think maybe their defense can steal this game. I just don't see that to this point anyway. So we, the 6 points that Toronto is laying, that was a big one for me too. So I'm like, okay, if I can't find the upset, can I find the path where maybe I hedge my bets and take the Elks +6? What if I wanted to? And even with that, I don't quite feel like I can find it. So I'm going to have to lay the -6 on the Argos here as well. I don't think there's a world of separation between basically any 2 teams in the CFL. So I kind of don't like laying that many points this early in the season, but it is still under a touchdown. So let's lay the -6 on the Argos. Total in the game set at 49.5 points. I do feel like this goes over. This is a pretty good number. I think like a low 50 makes a lot of sense in this game. I'm going to go like 31-20 in favor of the Argos. So we're going to have the Argos get the win. The Argos cover the -6 and give me the over on the 49.5 point total. And the last game we're going to look at is a rematch from last week. The Hamilton Ticats now travel to Saskatchewan to take on the Riders. The Riders came away with the win in this matchup last week, 33-30. The Ticats were outscored 26-10 in the second half, coughing up a 2-score halftime lead against the Riders. No run game for either one of these teams in that game. In fact, the two teams combined for just 63 yards rushing on 25 carries and a Shea Patterson rush touchdown. But one thing we did see was two 30-plus-year-old veteran quarterbacks. You've heard of Avengers Assemble? This was Gunslingers Assemble in this game. Trevor Harris, 390 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Bo Levi Mitchell, 380 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And the big fluke interception on a pass attempt to Tim White in the last 40 seconds of the game at their own 37-yard line winds up being the difference in the game. It sets up the Brett Lauther game-winning field goal. One thing I'm going to be paying attention to in this rematch, the Riders did allow 4 quarterback sacks and are now up to 6 sacks allowed on the season in an O-line performance that harkened back to some of their worst impulses and worst outcomes from the last 2 seasons. The teams also combined for a very sloppy 215 penalty yards on 20 penalties combined. Neither one of these teams was ready to play a disciplined game. I kind of see a sloppy rematch inbound in this one, but I do feel like the Riders right now, if I had to peg it, I would say Montreal's the best team in the league right now. The Argos are probably still number 2. I think I could get away with saying the Riders might be the CFL's 3rd best team right now. They might be the best team in the West. BC would have something to say about that, I'm sure. Calgary would probably have something to say about that, I'm sure. And maybe even Winnipeg going hey, we're 2-0, but we're still the Bombers. But based on what has happened on the field, I think I could make the argument that the Riders are the league's 3rd best team. Based on that, and based on the fact that the game is moving to Saskatchewan, I'm on the Riders in this one. Give me Sasky at home to get the win over the Ticats. I'm on all 4 home teams this week. On the line, the Riders are laying -2.5 points here as a marginal home favorite. I like them to win. It's a small price to pay. Give me the -2.5 on Sasky. Total in the game set at 50.5 points. These two teams just combined to go for, 63 last week? Yeah, give me the over in this one for sure. I don't think we see another 60 plus, but 55, I think 55 is totally reasonable. So let's go over the 50.5 point total. Let's go 31-24 Riders. Sasky wins. Sasky covers the -2.5 over on the points. You might have noticed I made you wait till the end this time. Time for CFL Fantasy. Time for my CFL Fantasy roster for week 3, which is right in front of your eyes right now. And one of the first things that you might notice is that on the defensive side, I am spending min money. You can't play no defense anymore. I literally don't believe the game allows you to play no defense anymore. And the top defensive plays this week are all $10,000 plus. So that you have your decision. Do you want to spend up, which means you can't spend up in other positions without, robbing Peter to pay Paul, or is this the Peter that you rob? And this was the Peter that I decided to rob. So I'm going to play the Hamilton Ticats because they're min money at just 5,500. Even if they do give up 30 points again, even if I only get a couple of points from the defensive position, it doesn't kill me, and it allowed me to spend up in other spots. You'll notice I spent no less than $8,500 on any other position in my fantasy roster this week. I am stacking quarterback Trevor Harris with Kyan Schaefer-Baker at wide receiver. That is a $21,800 stack, but I obviously like the upside of the Riders on the offensive side this week. The other wide receiver I'm going to go with is Alexander Hollins because he has been an absolute monster through 2 weeks for the BC Lions. The running back position, I'm going to grab Walter Fletcher there at 8,500. He's starting to get the touches in the pass game. He's basically getting a very consistent number of carries, around 12 to 13 carries, and he's making good on them. So we're going to grab Walter Fletcher there, and we're going to go with Kadeem Carey, because obviously he showed he's got stuff left in the tank. And at 10.4 thousand, it's not an unreasonable amount of money to spend. And then we're going to grab Curly Gittens in the flex at 8,500. He is one of the CFL's leading target getters in the receiving game. And as long as MBT is going to be the quarterback and is going to be attempting 40 passes a game, let's go ahead and try to grab some of that. And Gittens was really affordable at 8,500. There you go, folks. Those are my picks and plays for week 3 in the CFL. We'll go over them here with you one more time. I've got the Montreal Alouettes at home beating the Ottawa REDBLACKS 24-19. Give me the +7 on the REDBLACKS in that game with the under on the 47.5 point total. I got the Winnipeg Blue Bombers beating the BC Lions at home 27-21, laying the -2 on Winnipeg in a game that stays just under the 51 point total. I've got the Toronto Argos at home coming off the bye and beating the Edmonton Elks 31-20. I'm laying the -6 on Toronto in a game that goes over 49.5 points. And I've got the Saskatchewan Roughriders at home beating the Hamilton Ticats 31-24, laying the -2.5 on Saskatchewan, over on the 50.5 point total. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch the show again this week, folks. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. You may have noticed on Twitter that I threw up a little poll last week that if I were to go to a game in week 18, which game should I go to? We had a winner. I'm going to be running a couple more of those polls over the next couple of weeks. And there's a specific reason for that, which I will talk about later. So, thank you so much for taking the time to watch. We will see you again for week 4, and enjoy another week of our beautiful Canadian game.